Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, where you are, friends. Welcome to today's webinar, where we will be exploring the topic, the society that we live in, the challenges that our men go through. My name is Tola Dialsho, and I'm your host and an Assistant Secretary of Voice of Men 360. I'm also a registered social worker, and it is my great pleasure to host this webinar today. So thank you, Voice of Men 360 and the team for giving me this opportunity. We hold these monthly webinars to create awareness on topics such as this, with the hopes of sharing valuable information with our community as we believe it will be useful in some ways. Before I introduce our special guest today, I want to give you a brief introduction of Voice of Men 360. So Voice of Men 360 is a nonprofit organization founded in 2020 and is based in Toronto, Canada. Voice of Men 360's organization was born out of seeing the tremendous need for boys and men in our society. So it decided to step up and support and help them in many areas of their lives. So we are part of International Men's Day, which is a global nonprofit organization. International Men's Day is based on 6 pillars, which has to do with the overall well-being of boys and men. It has been around for 21 years and it is represented in nearly 90 countries. These countries join together to do various activities on a regular basis. So as I mentioned earlier, our topic for today's webinar is the society we live in, the challenges that our men go through. Our special guest is Kara Hart. Kara is the manager of the bail program and hate prevention services of John Howard Society of Peel-Halton-Dufferin region in Ontario. She has been dedicated to John Howard Society's mission of empowering people and reducing crime for over 16 years while lending her skills and enthusiasm to a variety of social and criminal justice programs and services. Her education is in community outreach and social development, and she's currently working on a degree in psychology. Kara channels this knowledge and passion towards bettering the lives of this complex population and addressing the gaps in service in the justice system. Welcome, Kara, to today's webinar. Oh, I think you're muted. Okay, let's try again. Yes, I can hear you now. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So before we get into a bit more, can you just tell us a little bit more about what John Howard Society is all about?
Sure. John Howard Society of Peel-Halton-Dufferin has been around for the last 40 years, serving our community. We are affiliated with John Howard Societies across the country and across the province. Our agency specifically is affiliated with the John Howard Society of Ontario as well. And we all work together to address gaps in service in the justice system and provide services to individuals in the community. Historically, we've been known to serve men, although over the course of our development, we have recognized that there's a need for services for all populations, regardless of gender. And so we now serve anyone who is at risk of being in the justice system or who is currently in the justice system.
Oh, yes, sorry, continue. I thought you were done.
I can give you a little bit more information, or if you'd like, we can move on to something else.
Well, I mean, I think that's a pretty good overview of what John Howard Society is. And so I just want to ask you a more personal question. So can you tell us more about your childhood and what influenced you to study community outreach and social development?
I grew up in Oakville, Ontario, and in Carlisle, Ontario. So I was lucky enough to have a fairly privileged life. My mom was a CYC, Child and Youth Counselor in the Halton District School Board. And through her work, I was really influenced to get into a helping profession. Although I am also an avid writer and started off in journalism out of high school, but felt that it was missing something for me, and so ended up switching to community outreach and social development. So through my education, I was introduced to the criminal justice sector and felt that that population was really what made my heart sing and where my passion was. So I ended up doing a school placement with the John Howard Society of Hamilton, and shortly after graduation was hired with Peel-Halton-Dufferin.
Wow, that's amazing. So it sounds like you were influenced by your mom and the kind of work she did. And then along the way, you realized that you wanted to maybe contribute more to society. And you found yourself doing this placement with John Howard Society. And it seems like you've never left.
That's right. Yeah,
You just switched locations.
that's right.
That's amazing. Okay, so thank you for, and it sounds like you're very passionate about this. And so it's always great when people are in a field that they're very passionate about, because I find that's where you put in more effort and you do more. And it sounds like that's what you've been doing, because 16 years, right, that you've been working with the organization?
Yes, that's right.
That's awesome. So can you tell us more about John Howard Society of Peel-Halton-Dufferin Region's mission and services?
Absolutely. Our mission is to empower people and reduce crime. We do that through our recognition that anyone can become a healthy and contributing member to society if they have the resources and the help that they need. Our priorities are providing resources, education, and intervention services, and encouraging all clients to become active members of their community. We do this by basing our practices and our interventions on research rather than fear. So rather than incarceration, we provide community-based services, and believe that people being enmeshed in their community is a better method of rehabilitation and reintegration than custody.
Okay. So it sounds like you guys are definitely about making sure that people are helped through the criminal justice system, but also that they can rehabilitate once they are once, what's the word I'm looking for? Not discharged, but once they are let out of the criminal justice system. Correct?
That's right. For example, I manage the bail program, which is specifically designed to divert people from being held in custody while they're waiting for their trial, and while they're navigating the criminal justice system. And so we work really hard to connect those people with local services, provide them with counseling, and address their risks and needs in relation to what is causing their criminal behavior, and trying to help sort of intervene and divert them away from that type of behavior in the future.
No, it sounds like you guys are definitely doing important work. So on that note, you mentioned that for the most part you guys worked with men, but now you're starting to work with all genders. But let's talk more about men and trauma, because I have a feeling that some of that leads to why maybe people engage in criminal behavior. So can you just enlighten us on men and trauma?
Sure, I'm certainly not an expert in men and trauma, but I can tell you that a significant portion of our population, and it is a difficult sort of statistic to nail down, because we find that men in our service are not necessarily comfortable talking about trauma, but those that do open up, there's a long history of trauma behind their behavior. So whether it's a lack of a safe place to grow up, a lack of positive role models, physical abuse, sexual abuse, general poverty, a community that isn't necessarily a safe place. So the issues sort of span quite a gambit, and our staff are often having to support men who've experienced significant trauma without the services to address it. So we attribute this to sort of societal expectations of masculinity, and being vulnerable. So it takes a long time for us to develop a relationship with our clients where they're willing to divulge that they've experienced trauma and then feel comfortable enough to access help regarding that trauma.
Okay, so that's something that you try to come from that trauma informed lens, and you try to understand that perhaps there's been many things that may have happened to this individual as they were growing up, and they're not open and yet ready to share it with us.
That's right.
Thank you. Let me. You mentioned something about positive role models earlier, and so oftentimes I'm guessing sometimes these individuals may not have even any positive role models in their life. Maybe they didn't grow up with their parents or anything. Can you tell us more about what positive parenting is, and what does it have to do with maybe how they may be able to avoid the criminal justice system, or how individuals maybe would have turned out better?
Sure. So, I mean, there's a large body of research that it's essentially split. There's a body of research that says having both parents is crucial and influences from both genders is crucial, and there's also a large body of evidence that says that's not necessary. What we have observed and what we do know is that it's important for men to have role models who are able to express emotion and frustration, anger, fear, sadness in a healthy way, and to be able to talk about those issues and demonstrate positive conflict resolution. Whereas many of our clients are not able to do that. And so a significant amount of our work is spent teaching men emotional vocabulary, positive ways of resolving conflict, nonviolent ways of addressing their emotions and the conflict that they may have within relationships. And so we have a number of different programs, like anger management is sort of the normal term for it, but it's actually emotion management because it's more than just anger. We find that a lot of men have 3 emotions that they're able to label: happy, sad, and mad, where there's so much more of a larger spectrum of emotion, and each emotion requires a different way of expression and a different resolution to it. So we spend a lot of time doing that. And also we do healthy partner relationships to create better communication. So a lot of these men haven't had an opportunity to see their own role models demonstrate these positive ways of communicating. And it doesn't necessarily mean that their parents were toxic or dangerous in any way. It may be that their parents hid conflict resolution from them, and so they grew up without that opportunity to learn how to solve those problems. But certainly positive role models who are able to demonstrate those skills is crucial to growing up as a healthy male.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so basically what you guys are doing is when you acknowledge and you recognize that these individuals may not have had positive role models or learn how to, like you said, conflict resolution, or to talk about their feelings and emotions, you guys fill in that gap for them through the John Howard Society.
We try to, yes. Our anger management program has quite a good success rate, but we're also fighting against a society that tells men to suck it up, that it's not okay to cry, and that it's a performance culture. So the more manly you are, the stronger you are, the more you fit into the ideal male. So it kind of it is a struggle for the men that we're working with to recognize that that type of masculinity isn't healthy or helpful, and it's contributing to some of their issues in regards to developing healthy relationships, and maintaining jobs and maintaining housing and things like that. So it's a battle between what we know works and what society is looking for in men.
Well, so let me ask you a question. So a lot of the men you're working with, are some of them in the program or in the criminal justice system because they were trying to be more masculine, maybe show that you can't do this to me, and their anger came out? Do you find that is the reason for why some of these men are in the criminal justice system?
To a certain extent. So certainly within intimate relationships, there's often a struggle. Anybody who's been married or in an intimate relationship knows that at some point there's going to be conflict. And without those skills, that conflict can increase quite quickly. And then we also have domestic violence, which is a cycle. So if you never learned positive behaviors from your parents, then and they were abusive, or the father or one partner was abusive to the other partner, that's learned behavior, and cycles down. I will give you the example also of I currently also manage hate prevention services, and there is it's a fairly new area of research. There's not a lot out there, but what is out there talks about how those who perpetrate hate crime are looking to solidify and protect their place of power in the community. The largest demographic of perpetrators of hate crime are white males. There's a large group that are youth, but then there's also a larger group that are sort of pre-middle age to middle age white males. And a lot of that comes from their attempt to protect their place of power. And when someone doesn't fit the ideal male of society, so that heterosexual, white, affluent male, they find other ways of doing that. And that often comes out in antisocial behavior and violence. So it really is that struggle to find their place and communicate their place in society. And unfortunately, it often results in criminal charges.
So can you tell me more, since you mentioned the hate prevention services, what does that service look like? How do you guys help them?
So that's an interesting question, because hate prevention services is fairly new, and across the world, we're just learning about what actually works in intervention and prevention of hate. Europe is about 10 years ahead of North America, and I would say the United States is maybe 5 or 6 years ahead of Canada. We tend to be more polite about situations, in the sense that we might not be as overtly violent as the United States, but certainly that undercurrent of hate is still there. So we're still trying to find our feet. What we do know is that public education about hate and what that looks like is important, but also, intervening with people as early as possible. So not waiting till it turns to violence. Police have been able to track people from instigating a slur, which is unfortunately not a criminal offense, through to much more violent offenses. So we do know that there's an escalation pattern. So it's important to intervene as early as possible so that you can change those thinking patterns. So we use cognitive behavioral therapy and social learning theory to intervene with those individuals. So individual programming to address their specific needs, and some of the issues that might be leading to their sense of lack of control and power in their life.
Okay, so it sounds like you guys are still developing it, but you are learning from other countries like in Europe that have been working on these things for some time.
That's right.
Okay, so let me ask you, so speaking of, this hate prevention, and so let's talk more about anti-criminal thinking. How does one develop it, and what exactly is anti-criminal thinking?
That is also a good question. So criminal thinking often includes modes of thinking that, the world is against me, I have to protect myself, I deserve to act this way because of X, Y, and Z. people who have more than me should be giving up what they have so that I can have it. And anti-criminal thinking is really learning to take responsibility for your own behaviors, recognizing that you are an important member of society and that your behavior affects other people. And that you're going to get more out of your life and society if you are a productive member of that society. So really giving those skills to be an autonomous person in the community, but also connected and productive within that community. So we talk about things like thinking patterns, negative thinking patterns, sort of ways of thinking like all or nothing thinking, catastrophic thinking, that get in the way of behaving in a healthy manner and create division from being able to develop positive relationships with those people around them.
Okay, no, that's awesome. So you guys are you're looking at these unhelpful thinking styles to help them understand what what is anti-criminal like to get them into an anti-criminal thinking mindset, correct?
That's right.
Okay, that's awesome. And so let's talk more about how men are impacted by the pressures in life. What have you seen with the men that you've been working with?
In general, I would say it is very much anybody who's living in North America right now recognizes the pressures of economic down swings and vast unemployment, unaffordable housing. When our men are coming out of the system or even simply involved in the system, those pressures that sort of everyone in society feels on an everyday basis are compounded. They recognize that they can't meet the ideal of society, and they have so many barriers to getting there, they feel hopeless. And often that creates a cycle of reincarceration. So, for example, if someone incurs domestic violence charges, they're separated from their family. They're not allowed to return home. And those charges could be in court. The average charge right now is 120 days between charge and resolution. That's a long time. And given that's the average, we know that there are people who are in court and we have them on our caseload for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So that means that they're floating 2 households, 2 sets of expenses and responsibilities towards their children that they're often not allowed to see. That also, the longer it drags on, often results in other charges because, they want to see their children, or, their partner needs them to come home to fix something in the house. So there's significant pressures when the criminal justice system places those barriers. So a large portion of our work is trying to help these individuals mitigate that impact. Often we see men who just say, I just want to plead guilty and get it over with, whether they're guilty or not, because of the pressure of, I can't find a job, nobody respects me, my family has shunned me, I'm not a man anymore. It's sad and it's challenging at the same time to try and help these men find a sense of self-respect, and recognize that sort of the societal male ideal isn't necessarily what reality is for most people, and that there's no shame in not meeting that ideal because you're still a valuable person.
So you mentioned that they're maybe sometimes carrying 2 households and all that. Like, how do you guys help them out with that, or you're not able to?
Many times we're not able to, because, for example, if you're employed, you're not eligible for the majority of social supports. And then if you end up on those social supports, it's definitely not enough money to help those families. So often we're connecting with victim witness programs to see if there's anything that can be done for the family itself rather than directly for the male to help relieve some of those responsibilities. But the sad reality is there is not a lot that we can do in those situations because of the way our social service system in Ontario is set up.
Wow. So you mentioned also that oftentimes they're not feeling like they're a man anymore, or that they've lost respect for themselves. Like, how do you guys help them to gain that respect back and to start to feel good about themselves again?
Well, we know that the majority of behavior related to criminality is often learned behavior. So it's starting from you can't do what you don't know. So if you've never learned how to hold a job, or you've never learned how to manage money, or you've never learned how to resolve conflict in any way other than violence, how can society expect you to behave any differently? So it's while you are responsible for your own behavior, society has some responsibility in the fact that you never learned how to behave in a pro-social way. So it's starting there and helping them take responsibility for their behavior and learn to do better. And then also helping them find the resiliency and strength within themselves to persevere through the challenge and come out the other side. We often find that once they leave our programming, that they do have some of that. And it's also about connecting them with community so that they feel like they have a safety net, and then that they're not alone anymore. Because often when they're going through the criminal justice system, they feel very isolated. So having that community safety net is so important.
So when you say community, are you talking about other social services, or are you talking about other people that are going through similar things? What do you mean by community?
Sure. So that's a very culturally specific question. It could be different for everybody. It could be connection to other social services, longer term case management. It could be helping them develop positive relationships with family members that they maybe haven't had so far. It could be giving them the skills to address conflict and power and control issues so that they can re-enter their intimate relationship and have that relationship be a healthy one once they're done with the criminal justice system. It could be positive parenting programming, connection with their religious community. It could be peer mentoring. It could take a whole with each client, it's a different sort of tailored package.
No, and that makes a lot of sense. So it's not one size fits all, but you're tailoring it according to what that individual requires.
That's right.
Okay, that's great. So do you guys ever work with men in crisis, or I mean, obviously you've kind of mentioned and you've talked about that these individuals you're working with are vulnerable, but do you work with men in crisis, and how do you guys find that to be when they are in crisis?
We do work with men in crisis, and crisis can take on all kinds of different different pictures. So most of the people that we work with, we meet them many times on the worst day of their life. So they've been charged often for the first time, or again, after they've been in the community for quite some time and have been doing really well, but have had a bit of a relapse. So it really is about treating them with respect and empathy, and with an anti-oppressive framework in mind. So being that person who they assume is going to judge them, but then not being the person to judge them. Really trying to be that safe place to fall, that safe place to go when they are struggling, to help them recenter themselves and start moving forward again. Crisis could be an immediate emotional and mental health crisis, or it could be they've lost all of their resources and they don't know where to go from here. So whether we're doing mental health first aid in the moment, and then helping them access hospital services or other crisis services, or just being that ear to talk to, and sort of developing some immediate solutions, or helping them sort of put those pieces back together, such as housing, finances, etc., to help them find some stability again.
No, that's fantastic. It definitely sounds like you guys are doing really good work. And like you mentioned earlier, you guys have been around for about 40 years, correct, in Canada?
No, John Howard Society Peel-Halton-Dufferin has been around for 40 years.
Okay.
But the John Howard Society in general has been around much, much longer. John Howard was actually an individual who really started looking at the human rights issues within the prison systems. And then the societies developed based on his philosophy.
Okay, great. Is there anything else that we haven't covered today? Because I know there's a lot that you guys do, and there's a lot to know about this that you would like, that's like really pressing on your heart that you would like to share with us today.
I think just that anyone can end up going from a place in life where they're thriving to a place where they're not. And often that's the difficulty that that we work with, is that men who really saw themselves as successful members of society have hit some sort of life crisis and ended up in a place they never imagined. So treating people with respect and kindness really is the basis of helping people reintegrate into society, and understanding that just because somebody has a criminal record doesn't mean that they can't be a productive member of your community.
Great. Thank you so much. What a powerful message you just shared. Thank you so much for all you do. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the John Howard Society of Peel-Halton and Dufferin region, and particularly Keith Kasuta, the CEO, for arranging this discussion, and Vanita Puri for introducing John Howard Society to us here at Voice of Men 360. Thank you so much, Kara, for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking your time to talk more about what you guys do and how you're helping to help men to reintegrate back in society, and just all the other services that are available through John Howard Society. We do appreciate the work you're doing.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. So before we close today, I have a few announcements to share with you. So here at Voice of Men 360, we have, actually, sorry, hold on one second. Sivam, do we have anybody, because I think there were some messages that popped up through the chat. Is there anybody that has any questions for Kara? Sorry about that, Kara, but I just realized that maybe there are people that may have a comment or questions that we could share with you.
Yeah, hold on one second.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience, Kara.
No problem.
Is there any, okay, is it possible, okay, here's the question though.
Is it possible, are there programs for boys before they get to men? Ooh, that's a good question. Do you guys have anything like that at John Howard Society?
We do. We have a whole body of youth programs. Many of them are diversion programs. So youth who are just starting to exhibit those behaviors that might get them further involved into the criminal justice system. One of them is the Youth Justice Committee, which is an opportunity for youth who are exhibiting criminal behavior to meet with members of the community and many times the victim as well, to talk about how their behavior has impacted the victim in the community and how they can work to make reparations for that and become a more positive member of that community. It's a really powerful program. The volunteers who participate in that program really find the outcomes quite profound. So that's one of the programs. And then it goes all the way through to youth who are heavily involved in the criminal justice system. And we provide them with intensive weekly intervention through our youth, Halton Youth Attendance Center.
Okay. No, so that's great. It's good to know that you guys do have services available. Are there any more questions, Sivam, that came up, or any comments that people made on Facebook Live or even YouTube?
No, I'm actually. Do you guys have any programs or services for indigenous communities?
I'm sorry?
He asked if you have any services or programs that are tailored for or catered to the Indigenous communities.
We are working on programming for the Indigenous communities. We have had programming in the past. Unfortunately, we weren't able to maintain those programs because we are not experts in the Indigenous community. So we found it really important to make sure that our agency is grounded and able to provide those programs from an Indigenous-centered lens. We don't want to just say that we provide programming and then not be able to provide the culturally specific programming that needs to happen. Right now, we are working to provide Indigenous-centered diversion programming, but we want to get it right. So we're working with the Indigenous community and other criminal justice organizations to make sure that when we do come out with programming, that it's what the community needs.
Right. Yeah. And that is so important, right? You're right. It's better to get it right than to put something out there that is not what they need and it does not actually meet their needs at all. So it's good for you guys that it's taken time, but I think it's important to do it right. And so that way that the Indigenous communities you're trying to serve are feeling that they really put some thought and consideration into this.
Yes, that's what we hope.
Yeah, that's great. Is there any more questions, Sivam, or any more comments?
Well, we have lots of comments. Let me see.
Okay, so I'm going to read this. Frustrations and impact divorce hearings have on men. Floating two households while dealing with. Oh, okay. So I think these are some of the comments that you, based on what you were telling us, Kara, I believe, right?
Yes,
okay.
I feel that one. That one is many of the men that we support are feeling exactly that helplessness, isolation, loss of self-respect, and suddenly they're not a treasured member of society anymore. So. And they should be, because that's an important part of recovery and reintegration, is feeling that you're part of a community.
Mm-hmm. So, and sorry, there was something I was thinking that just kind of popped in my head. So do you guys find the reason why this is so important is because you don't want these men to end up re-engaging in criminal activity. So this is why you guys make sure that you understand what's going on and you highlight these things so that they do not, to try to prevent them from entering the justice system again.
That's right. The longer someone is involved in the justice system and the more contact they have, the higher the likelihood that they're going to reoffend. So the more we can reduce that and really help them feel connected to their community and supported, we know that they're going to offend less and they're going to have a higher sense of well-being.
So you remember how earlier, and that's great. You know how earlier you mentioned that we're behind, especially with the hate prevention services and some other things. Somebody commented, and the comment just disappeared, but it said something about Canada being 15 years behind Europe. We have some serious ground to cover. Do you want to comment on that?
You're absolutely right. We do have some serious ground to cover. Back in December, we implemented 2 coalitions for the prevention of hate crime, one in Halton and one in Peel. We had entered them with the intention of putting programming into place right away into the community. What we've discovered over time is there's no infrastructure to support that programming. Our criminal justice system and our victim services right now don't necessarily support victims of hate because it's often not considered a criminal offense. So those resources are not there. The other resources that are not there are racially and culturally specific programming agencies and funding. None of that is in place. So, or what is in place is inadequately funded. So we have a lot of work to do from a systems level to make sure that we catch up to Europe and the United States.
Okay. So these comments keep popping up, but they disappear. So I'm going to see. Okay. So this comment right here says, important to express feelings that trigger trauma, such as relationship issues, sexual and emotional abuse, lack of respect that are considered toxic and treated as a utility. So, and I think you mentioned that earlier, right? Like this is why, like, we have to work from that trauma-informed lens, because we don't know where people are coming from. We don't know why they are the way they are and what caused and led them to do the criminal things that they may have done.
That's right. Criminal behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's always a story behind it. And recognizing that that story has validity and those feelings of trauma and traumatic experiences are valid.
Well, thank you. So there's more comments, but I think it's all basically the same thing, talking about the things that may contribute to criminal behaviors, talking about what we need to keep in mind when we're working with individuals that are in the criminal justice system. But it really sounds like you guys are doing good work. Now, I just got one more question. Peel-Halton and Dufferin, are those not quite large regions? And how come there's only one John Howard Society that covers it?
That's a good question. It is a large region, and we have a long way to go to building more resources to be able to serve such large communities. I don't know why there aren't more John Howard Societies. I think really it's about capacity and funding. Criminal justice is not warm and fuzzy. People have a hard time donating their money to people that general society feels are pariahs or not worthy of donation. So in general, it is a struggle to fund any programming that's related with the criminal justice system. So we do our best to serve the communities that we're involved with. All John Howards have a large catchment area that's difficult to serve. And I really do believe that it comes down to lack of resources and funding.
So, okay, so speaking of resources and funding, I guess it depends on what government is in power, whether it's federally, provincially, even locally, sorry. And then also, I guess it also depends on, like you mentioned, people wanting to contribute their funds to John Howard Society. So let's say we do have people listening today and are feeling very compassionate and empathetic towards the work that you guys do. How would they be able to reach you guys and donate?
So you can always go to our website, and there we have a method of donating right on the website. Or you can always contact one of our offices, and our staff can help you with that as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today. Is there one more question, Sivan?
I have a personal question here. So in your past 16 or 17 years experience, you come across a lot of situations. Can you share one or two incidents that you cannot really forget, unforgettable situations, how an individual interacted or went through so much struggles, and how did that person came out, overcome?
Sure.
Thank you.
We opened the John Howard Society Halton office back in 2006. Our very first client was a gentleman who was struggling with severe addiction and involvement with the criminal justice system. And he remained a client in a variety of different programs he's still a client, but he went from being homeless and heavily addicted to being stable and supported in supportive housing. He's clean. And he's really become a figurehead in the community. Other people who are struggling go to him to find out how did you do it, and what do we do, and where do we get help? So often when we ask people who brought you here or what brought you here, they'll mention his name. So he has really become a bit of an ambassador.
Right. No, that's awesome. Hold on. There's something here. Oh, and it disappeared. Okay. It says group founded by John Howard, who started all of this by looking to the human rights issues. Yeah, I think this is maybe just kind of like a validation of some of the things you were saying. Something of a Hail Mary for men so desperately in need of justifiable support and validation from society at large. Fairness from okay, thank you so much, John Howard Society. So yes, people are, I think this is so important. We are having this conversation because you're right. Oftentimes we look at people that are in the criminal justice system as pariahs, and we can't appreciate where they may be coming from, or even believe that they can turn their lives around. But your organization is out there trying to do that, trying to help people to come out of where they've been, and to even better them, right? So they're returning back to society as a whole person, and that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much once again for your time. So I'm just going to wrap up today's webinar. I do have a few more announcements to share with you. So here at Voice of Men 360, we do have live shows on a weekly and monthly basis. So we have Open Up, which is people sharing their personal life journey, and it takes place every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is a live talk show. And we have Vili, which is Tamil, another live talk show, which is on every Sundays at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we have this monthly webinar, which is the first Saturday of every month from 10:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we do have a monthly special show, the Unspoken Tears, which is every second Saturday of every month from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The focus is on domestic violence against men, bullying, male sexual abuse, and human trafficking. So next Saturday, it will be an exception because we will be holding a roundtable discussion next week to acknowledge June as Men's Health Month. And the topic for that, for the next Saturday's roundtable discussion is Not Told, Not Heard. So there will be speakers from Canada and the UK. They will be sharing their personal life experiences. And that is Saturday, June 12th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we do have a panel discussion that usually happens once a month in English and Tamil, where we bring people from different parts of the world to share their perspectives or thoughts or life experiences on a particular topic. So we also have our monthly men's group meeting, which is only for men, and it's a closed group. It is done in Zoom, but it's not broadcasted. And that's every third Sunday of every month from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. And that, once again, that's through Zoom. So you can register through our Facebook page. And the next one will be on June 20th, 2021. And so please register. And we also started a new support group for our Indigenous community. So it's called Pass the Talking Stick, and it's an Indigenous peer-to-peer support group. So that's the fourth Friday of every month from 6 to 7 p.m. And once again, that's a closed group, and that is through Zoom. And you can find more information about this on our Facebook page. So all our shows are converted into podcasts. So the shows that are live. So you are welcome to listen to them on 6 platforms such as iPhone, Google Play, and so on. Okay. Information on how to register for any of our upcoming programs can be found on our Facebook page, Voice of Men 360. So please join our community, invite your friends to join us as well. So as mentioned earlier, the month of June is known as Men's Health Month. The goal of Men's Health Month is to raise awareness on health issues impacting boys and men. Voice of Men will host the weekly shows, and we will be hosting weekly shows, in recognition of June as Men's Health Month. And we're also looking for new members or volunteers to join us here at Voice of Men 360. There's no limitations to gender, age, nationality, or ethnic groups. All walks of life can participate in any of our shows or in any of our programs. So if you want to be a guest on any of our shows, or you're willing to be part of our organization and help us directly or indirectly, please reach out to us. We would love to work with individuals, professionals, experts, community organizations, associations, corporations, government officials, and businesses. Our phone number is 437-889-8329. That's 437-889-8329. And our address is info@voiceofmen360.org. That's info@voiceofmen360.org. And our website is www.voiceofmen360.org. And you can find us on all social media platforms. So we're on Facebook, like I mentioned. We are also on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Voice of Men 360. So we want to reach out to more people and help more. So please continue to support. Thank you very much for your time, and I will see you next time.